So we're at the end of the 16th chapter of Shabbat. And you remember that yesterday we talked about, in the 5th Mishnah, we talked about spreading a goat skin over a box or a chest or a trunk which had caught fire, because it only singes. We're not burning the goat skin. We're just going to singe it. And we went from there very gently into the question of what we do if a Gentile comes to help us put the fire out on Shabbat. So we went from, if you like, preventing a fire breaking out to a Gentile coming to help us put out a fire. Now, today we're going to pick up this flip-flop, exactly the same flip-flop, covering something up and getting some help. And so we're in the 7th Mishnah. Still in chapter 16. We're in the 7th Mishnah. Rather than spreading a goat skin over the fire, we're going to put a dish over the fire. We're going to put a dish over it. Kofin ka'ara al gabe haner bishvil shelo techos bakura. We can turn a dish over a light so that the beam above it doesn't catch. We're in a small place. And, of course, this is a burning light, right? So it might catch the beam above. And just to prevent that, we're permitted to put a pot over it. And similarly, ve'al tzoesh el katan, over an infant's excrement. Not clear here, by the way, whether we're talking about that belongs to the infant or whether, this is animal poo, we're worried about a child will stray into. And if this was in the middle of a living space, we could certainly clear it away. But if it's something like, at the edge of the yard, somewhere where people don't very often go, but where a child might go and we're afraid, then we're not going to move it away, but we might put something over it, just as we put something over the chest that was on fire, or for that matter, this lamp. And similarly, ve'al akrav shelo tishoch, and over a scorpion that it shouldn't bite. And the Mishnah seems to be talking about a scorpion that's not dangerous, because if the scorpion were dangerous, then you could certainly trap it or kill it or get rid of it in some other way. We seem to be talking about a scorpion which maybe, scorpions come in different shades, right? This must be a small scorpion. So there's no danger to life, but it's still very uncomfortable if it should bite someone or if it should bite a child, maybe. So we're gonna put something over it, and we are going to be guilty of trapping, of tzayad, but we've averted any health problem. Or we think we have. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Ma'aseh lifnei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai." An incident came before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in Arav. We don't know where Arav is. It's some place name. Ve'amar chosheshani lo mechatat. I fear he may be liable to a sin offering. So clearly, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he's ambivalent about this one. And it's very interesting that this question as to what you do with a dangerous creature is discussed in parallel in the Mishnah in Eduyot. Eduyot's a very old Masechet. It's not structured along topical lines like all the other tractates of the Mishnah are. Eduyot means witnessing, and it's just a long list of things that people witnessed. It's a long list of sayings arranged in order of the people that witnessed them, if you like. And interestingly, Shloshat Devarim Amru lifnei Rabbi Yishmael. They said 3 things before Rabbi Yishmael. He's an old school guy. He's just after the generation of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. V'lo amar bahem lo isur veheter. He didn't declare them as either permitted or forbidden. So it's a gray area, right? This is a gray area. And the second one of these, I've just, if you like, just copied and pasted only the bit we need from this Mishnah. The second was the al hatzad nachash b'Shabbat, someone who trapped a snake on Shabbat. This is just like the scorpion. We're just capturing it on Shabbat. And the Mishnah Eduyot goes on to say, if we got involved with it so it shouldn't bite someone, patur, That's okay. Ve'im li rufua chayav. If we're trying to make some kind of medicine out of something in the snake, we're guilty. So the Mishnah in Ediot seems to be saying, look, if we're anxious about ill health, then we're going to push the boundary on trapping in order not to run a risk. And then, just as the Mishnah that we learned yesterday went from preventing injury to getting Gentiles to help, so this Mishnah, it's the last Mishnah in the chapter, goes on to say, Nochri shehidlik et haner. A Gentile lights a lamp. A Jew can use the light. Ve'im bishvil Yisrael asur. But if it's for the sake of a Jew, it's forbidden. We can't ask, the Gentile can't light the lamp for the sake of a Jew, or we certainly can't ask him to do so. Really interesting clash, by the way, with the medieval Shabbos goy, who would certainly come in and do something for the sake of a Jew. And the Mishnah goes on, Mile maim lahashkot behemto. Maybe he draws water to water his animal, and the cistern is considered a private place. And if we draw water, we're drawing it essentially into the public domain. So this is a bit like carrying from private to public. So he filled up a water bucket to water his animal. And the Mishnah goes on, Mashke acharav Yisrael, a Jew can water after him, can use some of the water. But the same closure, ve'im bishvil Yisrael asur. But if it's for the sake of a Jew, it's forbidden. What about coming off a ship? Maybe a ship has docked on Erev Shabbat. It's docked just before Shabbat. Can we get off the ship on Shabbat? Asagoy kevesh leiredbo. A Gentile made a plank to descend off the ship. Yoreda harav Yisrael. A Jew can descend after him. Same closure. This is like halachic poetry. Ve'im bishvil Yisrael asur. And if it's for a Jew, it's forbidden. It happened that Rabban Gamliel and the elders were traveling in a ship. There are many, many stories, by the way, about Rabban Gamliel and the elders who were traveling in a ship. And it seems like they went to Rome a number of times by ship, obviously, because you couldn't get to Rome any other way in those days before they had planes. And they certainly wouldn't go by land. But in Basfina, so they were traveling and they came in a ship. Ve'asagoi kevesh le redbo, and a Gentile made a plank for getting off. Ve'arduvo Rabban Gamliel zukenim, and Rabban Gamliel and the elders descended by it. And so we know, of course, from observing what happened, that this is permitted. The ship must have docked just before Shabbat, because if the ship had docked on Shabbat, I don't think he would have got off it. So that is the close of the 16th chapter. And then as we begin the 17th, and I wanted to just touch on the 17th today because it's such an important chapter and we can't get through it well, we're going to take many sessions to get through it. The 17th chapter begins with things that we pick up and we don't pick up. So we can see again, we seem to be going flip-flop, issue Gentile, and the issues are connected. We covered the casket or the trunk that might have had a fire burning in it. We covered the lamp that was a danger to the beam above it on Shabbat. And now we're going to say generally, Kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbat. All utensils or all kelim may be carried on Shabbat. Vidal totehen imahem, and their doors with them. When the Mishnah talks about kelim, it's more like the English word gear or stuff. Basically, anything can be a kli anything can be a kli if you use it. So a book is not a kli. I think a book is definitely not a kli. And something which is fixed to the ground like a house is not a kli. But just about anything else is a kli. It could be your clothes, your cooking pots, your tools if you're a workman. And we're going to see many, many examples of these. And some of them might not be suited to work on Shabbat. So, for example, can a workman, I don't know, pick up his axe on Shabbat if he's a woodworker? So the Mishnah is going to, and we know there are certain, we're going to learn that there are certain tools associated with forbidden activities which we won't pick up on Shabbat. There are certain tools, there are certain objects which are considered disgusting. So again, we're linking back into the Mishnayot which we learned today, something which are considered disgusting that you wouldn't pick up on Shabbat. But in general, the principle is kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbat. Anything that is a utensil can be carried on Shabbat. Vidal totehen, and their doors with them, by the way. This might be a trunk, for example, that's got a lid. Afal pi shenit parku v'Shabbat, even if they became detached on Shabbat. She'enan domin l'daltot habayit, because they're not like the doors of a house. B'fi she'enan min hamuchan, which are not set aside for use. The qualification for something being carryable on Shabbat and being not muktzah is that it might be used on Shabbat. Min hamuchan means something which is set aside so that we could use it on Shabbat. And then as the 17th chapter progresses, we're going to see more and more examples of these kind of things which can be carried on Shabbat because they can be set aside for use on Shabbat. So we'll explore this more and more. And I just want, I can't resist mentioning that this 17th chapter, which begins with Kol HaKelim Nitalim, B'Shabbat Vidal Totehen, all utensils can be carried on Shabbat in their doors, actually ends Kol Kisuyei HaKelim Sheyesh Lahem Bait Achiza Nitalim B'Shabbat. All lids of utensils that have got a handle may be carried on Shabbat. So we are going to circle, as we learn the 17th chapter, we're going to circle around things which we're going to carry on Shabbat, and particularly utensils and things which are attached to utensils like lids and doors.